All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Legacy Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Evangelisti, and today I have another exciting guest on, Ryan Wright. He's from dohardmoney.com. Ryan's got 19 years experience in being a real estate investor, also obviously a hard money lender. Got some different experience back. We were just talking about with education piece, talking about building a legacy, which is obviously the crux of this show. And of course, I think a lot of my guests are extremely excited to continue to build their real estate portfolios. So Ryan, I think you're going to be a great asset to the show. Welcome aboard, and I'm glad to have you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So Ryan, tell us a little bit about your background, your history, where you've come from, what got you to this place, and why we're on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was really fortunate, kind of along the lines of the show. My mom and dad taught me financial principles when I was a kid. I was actually just speaking at an event 6 months ago, and they were talking about some basic financial principles, and it was to a room filled of doctors. And one of the guys grabbed me and he's like, "Doesn't this stuff just blow you away?" And I said, "Not really. I learned this when I was 9. And he was just, here's a guy that's highly educated, has advanced degrees. And he was just like, "I can't believe that." And so I think I was fortunate to do that. And it wasn't like they sat down and like, "Hey, do this, do this." It was, my dad bought rental properties. He was a chiropractor. He'd buy a property that was undervalued. I would spend the summer improving it. And then we'd rent it out or turn a fourplex into a sixplex. And then he'd pay it off and he'd buy another one a few years later and do it again. And he kind of had this philosophy of, you got the two jobs, you got your day job to pay the bills, and you got your investment job that builds the long-term passive income, and you got to work both jobs. And so I learned from that, really. So I started with that. I've been an agent, a loan officer. I've done my own rental properties. Because of my dad's example, I knew I need to get into rental properties. I've got to do that. So I bought rental properties before I even got into real estate school. And I got into real estate school because I thought that's how you did it. And from there, did my own investments. And then we helped other people invest, and then started lending money. And now we do education and software and tools to make it easier. So I've had quite the journey.
Isn't it awesome? I mean, it's an awesome story, and I lean back directly on the first thing you said, which is, the fact that your parents showed you, right? Like, I think teaching us, and I know you got 2 little boys, and I try to do this with I have 2 little girls, and I think that a lot of people, it's like they assume that this stuff is physically like you're sat down and it's instructed in a classroom or something along those lines, right? But sometimes just the doing and showing through doing, like your parents went and bought and they paid things off, and they showed you through action, what was right about the financial impact that they were making on your life, right? So sometimes just that activity.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times, like, money is a taboo subject.
Mm-hmm.
And in my house, money is not a taboo subject. As a matter of fact, my kids know, like my 7-year-old knows my net worth.
Mm-hmm.
And, I said, if you tell someone, you're going to be in trouble, and I won't share other things with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I share this with you because he wants to know how it works, and he wants to know how money works and those types of things. I mean, even like we went on vacation to Vernal, Utah, which is dinosaur like city of the world. There's more dinosaur bones there than anywhere in the world. And my 9-year-old finished reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I quizzed him on it, so I think there is some formal, but I believe the action, teach always and use words if necessary, is so much bigger, but on both sides of it. But I think opening the conversation where it's not taboo, it's like, "Hey, Dad, how much money did you make on that house?" "I made $30,000. "Hey, Dad, how much you making rent?" "Well, this one, after you take everything out, we end up with this." Having those conversations, I think is where it all starts.
Yeah. No, I agreed. I 100%. And, I was even having a conversation with my 10-year-old a couple of weeks ago on how contract wholesale works and putting the deal under contract and selling that piece of paper and what you can make on the spread and selling a piece of paper. And she says to me, "Can we get on the phone and start making calls to sellers?" Absolutely. I'm
yes.
like, talk about this the testimonial would be like the youngest kid ever to do a wholesale deal on the phone.
It'd be so cool. It'd be so cool. And just making that desire, making the desire to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ryan, tell me a little bit about something in that launched you to a different level. Maybe it was something that in your past that it was a big blow that you took, or some major challenge or obstacle you had to overcome, but something that kind of pushed you past a difficult time in your life that got you to a new level?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go back early on in my investing career, because it's always a challenge. I knew, because I had seen the experience of my dad, that buying rental properties and long-term holds generated wealth, period. Like, it happened. It may take time. It may take 20 years. It may take, whatever the case is, but I knew that was the case. And so I was buying properties back in the 2000s.
Mm.
And similar to like it is today, I was 21 years old. Similar like today, it's like, am I overpaying for this property? Like, I remember buying a property for $85,000 on 5600 West. I think it was 85 grand. And I'm like, I'm worried I'm overpaying for this thing. I'm worried I'm overpaying. That same house today is selling in the like 300s. So I think having that example gave me the confidence to continue buying, even when everyone else was worried, oh no, what's going to happen to the market? And as a matter of fact, even when the crash happened in 2008, even then I was worried. After the crash happened, I'm like, oh no, should I buy? Because values could continue to go down. Values could continue to go down. And I think one of the things that's helped me have some of those breakthroughs is looking at the best case and worst case scenarios. Like right now, I'm still concerned. Oh no, what's going to happen to the market next year? What's going on? And the reality is, the fear of the unknown stops people from taking action,
Mm.
and those people will just never. You just won't get ahead. So the question is, how can we package that? How can we live within that fear and mitigate our risks? And one of the things I do is I look at worst case scenario. I say, whether this house sold in 2008, and what would it have rented for in 2008? And funny enough, lots of times in 2008, rental prices went up in a lot of neighborhoods because people were losing houses and that type of stuff. So if I can analyze those two things, and maybe I'm still overpaying from 2008 prices because it may never get back to 2008 prices, at least I know, hey, I'm paying 20 grand more than what this would have sold for in 2008. But my rent is in line where I'd still cash flow if rents went down to that. Yeah, let's move forward with this investment. So I think the key is saying, figuring out what the worst case scenario is. So rather than letting fear dictate your decisions, you're actually aware. It's not the unknown. It's not the big monster that's going to come and get you. You know what the monster is, and you're choosing to take on that risk, and therefore will be rewarded for it in the long term if you can hold the property. And right now, if you can hang on to a property, it doesn't matter what values do. If you can pay the rent or pay the mortgage and those types of things with the rental income, if values go to zero, but you can still make the cash flow, I can assure you that in the next 30, 50, or 100 years, the values will come back. It's just a matter of time. If you look at what's happened with values over the last 30 years, it just happens. There are ups and there are downs, but there's only so much dirt, and we can't make more dirt. And when it's gone, it's gone. And lots of places, there's not much expansion, and so prices continue to rise.
Dude, you're giving me so many nuggets. I'm over here taking notes while you're talking because I'm trying to keep up with. Listen, I mean, I think for our listeners, there's so many things that you just said that are so important, and I want to reiterate them, right? So number one, you got started in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Right now is so similar potentially to that, because you got scared buyers right now. They're saying that the prices are getting up. Should I be buying right now with the current economic climate softening in the presidential election? All these external forces around us. Is now a time that I should be buying? Is now should I be competing with other people for prices? And is there something I should be getting into? And for example, we got into business really in '07, right before the bubble burst, right before everything got terrible. And from my own personal experience, one of the things that's kept us successful for all these years is we've always had multiple exit strategies.
Yes.
Right? So for one of the things to tap off of what you were saying, even when we got, even not necessarily stuck with a property, when we probably could have sold it, we had enough margin, we just decided we wanted to rent it anyway because it is cash flowing asset. Again, multiple exit strategies, right? It worked both ways. The rental market skyrocketed after the burst because you had all these people who were living in houses that they probably really couldn't afford pre-burst, right? They lost their jobs. They were making, $100,000 a year. They went and found a job for $75,000 a year. They got put back into the workforce, but their credit was shot because they had to do a short sale, or, for whatever reason they had foreclosed on. They lost their house. Now they're back in the rental market, but hey, they can afford $2,000 a month, $2,500 a month for rent, instead of the $4,000 a month they were paying for their mortgage. That's comfortable for them. So the rental market stayed really, really stout for years and years up until now. I mean, it's still huge in New Jersey, right? So the rental market always stays strong. As long as you have multiple exits, people need a place to live. So I think that's super important. The other thing is, you said, what is worst case scenario? If you protect your downside and you take calculated risks, so many people are on the fence and they're saying, well, I don't want to do this deal unless it's perfect. Folks, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of deals. I've never done a deal that was perfect. And I know you haven't either, Ryan. You never sat there and looked at a deal and went, this is a grand slam. There's no downside to this deal. There's nothing that could possibly go wrong, right? Yeah. Every deal, there's something that could possibly go wrong. It's frustrating, right? So you got to take action. And I think the last piece that I want to point out is that you had said, again, take action. Guys, taking action, the motion actually stunts the fear, right? When you actually are in motion, that consistency and that action taking is what keeps the fear at bay. It's the stagnation that lets the fear creep in. More and more fear will be compounded the longer you stand still.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I love the exits. I mean, I love to travel. And every time you get on the airplane, it's like, find the nearest exit. There's 2 in front of you. There's 2 behind you. There's 2 in the thing. And I literally think of that example every time I look at a deal. I was looking at a deal this morning. Yeah. I'm like, okay, exit 1, fix and flip, exit 2, or exit 1, wholesale, exit 2, fix and flip, exit 3, rental. What does it look like as a rental? What does it look like as a wholesale? What does it look like, in all those areas? I think knowing it. And one other thing that's such an advantage right now that most investors coming in aren't even thinking about is interest rates. Like, I got into the business when interest rates were 9%. They're currently like 3.5%. They're literally 200% less than what I was paying when I first got into the business. And I'm not saying, create a deal by, just by getting interest rates or overpay for a property. Like, you've still got to be reasonable. But if interest rates do rise and you've locked in a 30-year fixed rate on something, you have so many more options. If other people are into interest rates at 9% or 8% or 7% or 6%, and you're in at 3 or 3.5, you have a whole array of options of seller financing and subject tos and all these different types of things that you could creative finance on an exit strategy if required, if you lock in that low interest rate. And yes, there could be a due on sale clause, but the reality is that's a really low risk. It keeps people up at night, but if you're paying the loans, the banks don't want it unless you really piss them off. Yeah. And so anyway, there's that advantage as well that we have right now that wasn't available when I got started.
And let's not forget terms for a second, because when I started out, there was no such thing as more than a 5-year lock. Like, they wanted 5-year terms and reprice every 5 years. Everything offered to me now seems to be a 10-year plus reprice. So now all of a sudden you're getting these longer term locks, and if you're locking in these amazing interest rates, I mean, could they possibly be this good in 10 years? Who knows? But you're riding it out for long enough to pay down that debt. So good chance that 10 years from now, even if the prices decline, you're still going to have excess equity to play with because you're going to be paying down that debt over 10 years. Right. So,
and on single families, a lot of times we're getting 30-year fixed terms.
I mean, 30-year AM, but I'm talking about repricing, right? So,
yeah, no, there's a lot of places we're getting 30-year fixed for the entire 30 years, no repricing.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's insane. 30 years fixed, no repricing, fixed 30 years, done. Awesome. So there's a lot of areas, and it's going to depend on where in the country you are and some of those types of things. But yeah, we can get 30-year fixed right now on houses we buy on long term.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we used to get 5-year reprices. So Ryan, we just gave, I think personally, some good advice in the industry, right? What's some bad stuff that you're hearing floating around out there right now? Some bad advice that people are giving, or some things that you've heard that you just,
this is great.
Don't do that, right?
I think, what's the worst thing I'm hearing? I think that common sense goes a long ways. And lots of people, I think, don't do any of their own due diligence. So I think that if you're buying a property for cash flow, which is fantastic, you shouldn't be paying more than market value. So there's a lot of situations out there like turnkey investor, and I'm not ripping on them as a whole, but you have to be careful when you're getting into like a turnkey situation to make sure you're not overpaying. I've seen situations where people paid, $100,000 for a property that appraisal value is probably only 70 or 60, and they maybe pay cash for it because on paper the cash on cash investment looks great. I have concerns with that. I think that turnkeys are fantastic. You got to find the right operator. You got to make sure you're working with the right guy. But I think you want to make sure you're not paying more than what you could sell the property for, even if it's cash flowing. So cash flow is king. There's no question. But if you overpaid for the asset in this market today, only to get the cash flow, I think you could find yourself in a bad situation at some point. And maybe not. Maybe things aren't going to slow down. Maybe next year is going to be bigger. The year after is going to be bigger. But I like to make sure that even if you're buying cash flow, you're not overpaying for the underlying asset. Even if you're paying fair market today, be careful about that. The other thing that I find in a lot of situations with that is be careful of the neighborhoods you're in. One of my overriding principles is if I wouldn't let my wife walk down the street at night alone, then I don't want to buy there. And that doesn't mean it has to be like the perfect neighborhood, but if I would be worried about something happening to her when she walked down the street at night, that's not a neighborhood you probably want to be in. Now, you may have to start with some more difficult neighborhoods and work your way up. Just keep in mind when you do that, there's so much management intense. A lot of people will bring crappy deals in crappy neighborhoods and be like, cash flows like crazy. And I say, well, you're not including things. You're not including eviction costs and attorney's costs, and you're not including the police bill when they show up at midnight and for the, something that happened there. And you're not including, all these things. And so when you're early on, you may have to put up with some of that stuff so that you can develop some capital in that building and then 1031 exchange and upgrade your inventory. But the true cost of managing a property like that, handing a property like that over to a property manager doesn't work because it's so management intense. You can't pay someone enough to handle a property like that. If you do, they do a crappy job. They just can't make any money at it. Everybody's got to make money or they're not going to get any attention. So I'd say those are a few things that are top of mind right now.
Yeah, so true, so true. I used to have this saying that I would only buy houses that I would live in personally, and of course that's changed slightly over the last decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I love that you wouldn't let your wife walk down the street at night in that area, because I still think easily to this day my entire portfolio is in that type of category where you got to at least feel safe when you're in the area.
Yeah. I mean, I have agents of mine that'll they'll call and be like, to go to that house, I got to pack a 9mm with me. And I'm like, don't go, no, thanks. And to your point of like, would I live in it? I think that's a great litmus test as well. Even now it's like, would you want to, or would you be willing to? Like, if I needed to, I would live in any house that I own right now. Like, I would live there, no problem. Would I rather live in my house? Yeah, no question. But if I needed to, I could live in any of those houses and be fine. It wouldn't be my dream house, but I would be fine in any of those houses.
And I think the catch is too, like the ones that I would gladly move in and live in, those are the ones that are really appreciating, right? Those are like really in A-class neighborhoods where not only are you getting cash flow, you're getting appreciation. You're looking back and you're like, man, between the debt pay down and the appreciation, this house is like soaring in value. And literally 5-6 years later, we're able to sell them and make a big gap. Whereas the ones where the guys are like, oh man, the cash flow is amazing. You're looking back 6 years later, the thing's worth what you paid for it. Right?
Yeah.
So you get what you get.
And I look for the hybrid. I'm not in the A's, but I'm not in the D's and the C's. I'm like the B minuses, I'm sorry, the B pluses, the A minuses. I try and get the fringe because I want the cash return, but I want the appreciation. I want to be in a decent neighborhood. So that's kind of like my little litmus test. But, while we're kind of hammering this subject, I think with the legacy, it makes a lot of sense to talk about. Fix and flips are great. Wholesales are fantastic, but that's active investing. Mm-hmm. When we start talking about real estate, rentals or lending, we're talking about passive investing. And, a lot of people think, hey, I'm just going to start flipping some homes and make money. And they replace their current job with another job. But this new job, they hate their boss even worse because the boss is themselves.
Yes.
And then that becomes a problem, and that doesn't help them get ahead. It's the whole richest man in Babylon. You got to start by keeping some of what you make as your own. And if you can't keep some of what you make now in whatever you're currently doing, you have a problem. And more money ain't going to fix that problem because you're not setting aside some of what you make to be your own. So you've got to get in the habits of doing that. And then you can get into wholesales and fix and flips. And then all of that money can go towards your long-term investing and buying cash flow. And then you can get into the rental properties and start establishing that legacy. And whether we talk about legacy passing on to kids or talk about legacy of just paying me for the rest of my life, those things are really important. And I see a lot of people get mixed up with those two, not thinking like, oh, they replace one job for another job.
Uh, if you have a job, a 9 to 5, and you work for a psycho, wait until you're self-employed. Right?
Yeah. Then you start working for a moron.
I love it. I love it. And you, one more thing I want to touch on in my notes here. You said cash flow is king, right? We hear cash is king a lot of times. And cash, you can have a lot of cash stashed aside, right?
Yeah.
It's not helping you, but cash flow, that piece becomes, my good buddy Judge talks about how recurring revenue is the source of all, it's the culmination of everything, right? And that recurring rev comes in systematically, and cash flow really is a piece of is a type of recurring revenue, right? So, I think the listeners knowing the difference between those two things is paramount to being successful as well.
Yeah, it's one of our family rules. When you talk about legacy, one of the things we've done is we've put family rules together. So we have a big thing that's our family rules. And one of our family rules is, cash flow's king, equity's queen, and debt's a joker. We don't finance doodads. Some of those different types of things are family principles. When we talk about carry on to the next generation, one of the ways I'm doing that is I have family rules, and we have a family mission, and we have a family logo, a crest that's our family crest, which is on version number 5 right now because it needs work still. I'm not in love with it yet. I'm not to the point where I want to print it on all my stuff and wear it around. We're getting there, but those ways I can establish the fundamental principles that lead to success in everyday conversations and passing that on to my boys. Because what's more important, and this may be a tangent, but what's more important than money or passing on those things is the principles that got it. That's so much more valuable because the money without the principle, you lose it all. The principle without the money, you can get it all back. And so those things are really, really important to me.
I love that. So I'd like to ask this question, but let's just put one of your boys in this. Your oldest one is 9?
Yep. Taggart's 9.
All right. So let's take Taggart, for example. Taggart's getting ready to graduate high school. He's a driven young man. He's getting ready to go out and face the world.
Yeah.
What kind of advice are you going to give Taggart in, say 9 years?
Well, so I'm giving him the advice now. So I want him to buy a house when he turns 18. So both of my boys have a goal to buy a house when they turn 18. So they're saving money. So right now, one of the things they're doing is they're going around and knocking on doors and selling letter boards, those felt letter boards that you can cut out the letters and have the different colors and have the emojis. So you can buy them on Amazon for $20-$30. They sell them for $20. I bought them from China, got them in for $5, bought cases, and they're knocking on them. So they're doing that. But, what I'm going to say when he's 18 or 19 or something like that, and it's like, hey, let's go out and make the world a better place. The one thing I'm going to say is, do what you love. So I don't really care what my boys do for a living. Do what you love, right? Do what you love, but be intentional about what you spend. So I don't think that spending money, if you're into cars, great, buy a killer car. If you're into houses, buy a house, whatever, but don't be into everything. Decide what you want to be into and do that. And everything else cut like crazy so you can create what we call a personal margin. And then from there, invest. Be an investor always. And I obviously real estate's the key to do that. So, buy a house, save some money, put that money towards it, buy a house, put that money towards it, buy another one, start developing your cash flow, do it a little at a time. The reality is I think 10 houses, if anybody had 10 houses and they bought them when they were 19 years old and they kept them until they were 50 and they're all freaking paid off and it's going to generate 120,000 or I don't know, 250,000 depending upon your area of revenue, you're in pretty good shape. So, buy a house a year for the next 18 years or buy a house a year for the next 10 years. Those are the types of things that I'd be saying to him. But beyond that, it's, do what you love. If you love, I don't know, whatever it is, he's an engineering mind. So it's like, I'm going to be an engineer. And it's like, heck yeah, be an engineer. That's fine with me. Do whatever you want. Do what you love. Set aside some of that money and never forget being an investor is something you've got to do to build the cash flow.
Awesome, man. I love that. That might be one of the best responses I've had so far on the show.
All right.
So you're
I've
gonna
thought
love
about it a lot.
obviously. I mean, obviously. So I mean, my next two questions, I think you're gonna knock out of the charts, right? So what is one of the most valuable investments you've made? And this can be personal, financial, right? Because obviously, I don't think this is going to go the way I think it's going to go, right? Obviously, I think you're going to take a different spin on this.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is the best investment I ever made was on my mind.
Yeah.
I got to say it. I mean, so we can talk numbers and we can talk dollars, and I can tell you about how I lost 100 grand on a property because it was stupid. And I can tell you how I made $75,000 on a house. And I can tell you all these types of things. But the reality is, if I don't have, I think people walk by great deals every day and don't even know they're a great deal because they don't have the mental acuity knowledge yet to know that it's a good deal. And that's not a put down on somebody because anybody can learn it, but they haven't spent the time, they haven't spent the money, they haven't gotten with experts to understand how to do it. And the reality is, if you want to get somewhere, find somebody that's already been there and say, how the heck do I do it? And you'll be surprised because most people that have already made it actually want to help other people. It's like, I want to help other people. I want to make it happen. In doing that, though, I want to get something out of it as well. But I want them to get something out of it. So if you could sit down with somebody that's been where you've been, done what you've done, and says, give me the blueprint to do what you have done, that is extremely valuable. And that's going to come with a cost. Nothing's free. It might be you have to buy them lunch, and maybe you have to spend thousands of dollars to get that. But the level, I say this all the time, be really careful who you take advice from. Not all advice is not equal. You've got to filter where it comes from, because there are going to be a million people that are going to say, you're never going to do it. It's not going to happen. You know, your mother-in-law is like, oh man, you're never going to make it. You know, whatever the case is, everybody's going to put you down. Everybody's going to claw you down. And so you've got to decide where the advice comes from, where you're going to take it. I think developing your mind, developing your ability to make deals, developing your skill sets, developing, what you're able to do. I think one of the best things my dad did is when I was 15 years old, he came to me with a business proposition, and it told me he'd lend me money to buy a carpet cleaning machine, and said I'd have to pay him back plus interest, which has been a principle in my life because I make a lot of money on interest right now. And so I had paid him back, but then I could go around the neighborhood. And so I had a guaranteed client. I had to clean his carpets at the office once a month. That paid my note to him, and anything else I could make cleaning the neighbors, I made extra money. And I grew that in high school. I grew it. So I had a truck mount machine. I ended up selling that company. But what happened is I learned these sales skills, right? I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to knock on the door of somebody I didn't know and say, hey. And that's one of the things I tell my boys all the time is like, if you know how to sell, you're always going to be able to put food on the table, period. You're going to be able to put food on the table, no matter what market or anything else. If you know how to talk to people, make relationships, then you're going to be ahead in this world. So anyways, it's a huge tyrant.
No, that was awesome, man. I mean, and a lot of those things that you said are so, I mean, we're so in alignment there. It's not even funny, right? I think,
Nice.
when you invest in yourself, there's no better investment than the things that you put in your brain. I'm one of those guys that I preach about this all the time. I've spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on my education. I've never graduated college.
Yep.
I've been to every seminar, I've been to every event, I've been to everything, and I still do it to this day. I still go to these things. And, literally 2 hours ago, I had one of my friends call me, and in 7 minutes, I helped him make $25,000. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because when you're in the action and you're doing the thing every day, sometimes you just have that wherewithal to know how to solve problems. And it's from investing in ourselves to know how to create these solutions, right? It's from being in it all the time, So,
and what's crazy, like the college mentality is like, go to college, spend a bunch of money, spend $50,000, $100,000 in a college education. And then, you get a $50,000 a year job. But then a lot of people have a hard time spending $3,000 or $5,000 on a course on how to flip a property and make a bunch of money. And it's like, wait a minute, you're in debt, 70 grand in college debt you've been paying for 10 years. And the investment for, a $3,000 course gets you skittish. Yeah. There's something wrong with this equation here. Warren Buffett has a really good quote where he says, the more you learn, the more you earn. Yeah. And I think there's so much truth to that.
It's awesome. It's awesome. So Ryan, a couple more, and then we'll get into what you got going on right now currently with the education space.
Yeah.
What are your top three? I always say, what are the top three books that you gift to people? Because I'm a big gifter. I don't know if you gift books a lot, but what are the top 1 to 3 books that impacted your life the most, or maybe you give out to people the most?
Yeah. I love The Richest Man in Babylon. It's succinct. It's a little bit hard because it's kind of written like biblical.
Hmm.
But I really like it because I think if you read The Richest Man in Babylon and you apply those principles, you're going to do well in life, no question. So I really love The Richest Man in Babylon. The other one is The Master Key of Riches by
Awesome.
Napoleon Hill. Yeah.
Awesome book. Yep. Yep.
Fantastic book. I really like The Master Key of Riches. And then I don't know, there's so many great books that are out there. I hesitate. I'll tell you this, the number one book that I hear about all the time, people, guests that are on my podcast that I hear talked about, and it really was a life-changing book is Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And I just think it's hard to not say that that's a classic that needs to be there, but it's definitely needs to be in the top list.
Yeah, three amazing books for sure. Master Key is funny. I tell people about Master Key a lot, and they scratch their head like, "What's that?" Like, I
Yeah.
can't believe more people don't know about that book.
No, it's fantastic. And I got to throw a fourth. I'm really sorry, but
Yeah,
Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
I haven't read that one yet.
Oh, you got to read it. So,
Okay.
so Ayn Rand immigrated from Russia, and she was just saw socialism and communism, and she saw capitalism, and her whole book is a novel about capitalism and what happens with interference on capitalism and how it destroys a society. My oldest son is named Taggart out of that book, but it's like 500 pages. It's been sold like as many copies of the Bible. It's an amazing book. It's a long book. It takes a bit to get through, but the principles in there are outstanding.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I've heard of it. I just never read it. So I'll
It's a
definitely
long one. It's a long one.
get a copy. Awesome.
Yeah, do Audible. You can get through the audio a little easier. That's not a promotion for that.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about Do Hard Money. How does it work? What's the process? What's your target audience with that? And how can they get connected with you on there?
Yeah, I think we are looking for doers. I just can't say it anymore. We're looking for people to take the action. So for us, we've created a system. If you've got the motivation and you've got the willpower, you've got the strong enough why, and you've got a little bit of capital to get going. $5,000, give or take, could make something happen. We've got a system established to plug people into. We've got 4 different softwares, the Next Deal Blueprint, Investor's Edge software. We've got all these different tools to help plug people into. You've just got to take the action. And so we're looking for doers. And then we also have capital that we can give you to fund the deals as well. So we kind of created an entire ecosystem where if we can find doers, we're looking for a few good men and women. But the old military saying, we're looking for a few good people that want to strap on the work ethic and go make some things happen. And we've got a pathway that has helped a lot of people have success.
Awesome. So within that ecosystem, education, training, potential financing for the deal.
Yeah. Most of what we have is we're really software heavy. We've got a lot of tutorials and videos and that type of stuff as well. Most of it's self-help. We do have, you can chat or give us a call and that type of stuff, but we're not like one-on-one coaching, sitting down with somebody. We don't offer any right now. We don't have any mastermind program where we get together, those types of things. Those things are valuable.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't afford some of those types of things, we're probably a more economic solution to that. But it's going to take more discipline on your part to put some of those principles to action because you don't have the accountability like you would have with a coach or some of those things. So anyway, we offer those services so people can take advantage of, learn as you go. You've got to put in the time. And then we also have funding resources where you can fund deals. Kind of our big claim to fame is getting started with little to no money down. We'll finance purchase, we'll finance the rehab, we'll even finance the closing costs as long as that's all under 70%. And if it's not, we work on business partners, creative structuring deals, lines of credit to try and come up with that. And if we can't do that, then you're going to have to find a way to come up with some additional money if it's over, like, say, 70% of the ARV. Otherwise, our big thing is to try and get you as much money as possible so you can get investing and leverage and get some of that cash so you can start building your own cash flow.
Awesome. Anything I missed? I mean, we covered a lot of topics. I feel like anything that you wanted to cover that I didn't ask you.
Oh, I mean, there's so much to talk about. We could talk real
Yeah.
estate all day. I mean, we haven't even talked about like deals or anything like that. And that's probably good because the deals are a byproduct of
Mhm.
getting your mind in the right place, getting your education in the right place, and then the deals just come. It's amazing because I find so many people are like, "Oh, I'm having a hard time finding deals. I'm having a hard time finding deals." What are you doing to find deals? Well, I talked to an agent and he just hasn't found me anything. It's like, that's not called finding deals. Like, get off your butt, go knock on some doors, just knock on doors for the next 2 weeks and tell me if you can find a deal. I bet you'll find a deal. So it's, luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool, Ryan. Well, it was a lot of fun having you on here. I think we got through a lot of information. I think you brought a ton of value to the crew today. And if you guys are listening, make sure you go check out Ryan at dohardmoney.com. Any other contact info they should find you at, Ryan?
Yeah, I've got one of my books, How to Get More Money You Can Never Handle, Real Estate Investor's Guide to Funding Deals. If you want a copy, we sell it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that stuff. For your listeners, we'll give them a free copy, a digital download if they want it.
Awesome.
Just go over to dohardmoney.com/legacy-blueprint. So legacy-blueprint, dohardmoney.com/legacy-blueprint. And you can download a free copy of that if anybody's interested. And then, love to have you come check out Income Hacker as well.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And as always, guys, if you love what you're listening to, if you love the value we bring, please go into iTunes, leave us a 5-star review and a comment. Every week we pick a winner. Ryan, would you do a 10-minute coaching call with somebody if we pick a winner each week?
Oh, you bet. I would actually do a 45-minute coaching call with
45-minute coaching call. There you go.
Yeah. So I do a thing called Coach's Corner, and we sit down for 45 minutes. We start with where you're at, what your experience is, what your why is, what your goal is, and then where you're stuck. And I don't like people leaving that call without having I have a path to go that gets me to the next step. And that's a good point. Like, lots of people are thinking too far ahead. Like, you need to have big goals, but you also need to say, what's the next step? Because as you take that step, new steps open. So don't overthink it.
100%. There you guys go. So 45-minute coaching call. Make sure you guys leave the 5-star review, leave a comment. We'll pick a winner as soon as this podcast gets released the first week. We'll make sure we reach out to you guys directly. You get a 45-minute coaching call with Ryan, so make sure you leave the 5-star review. Ryan Wright, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate you, man.
My pleasure.
Awesome.